I wonder if how often do you have to change the battery? How long a battery life do you have?
About now, no, no. I have a portable, so I have a portable battery pack, and I can use that if I'm doing business. But the problem is, if you have a battery pack, charging it, and if it heats up, the speed goes down. Okay.
You had a problem last week. It's still miraculous.
What going to be focus people about not in for the casual conversation. Because of a local center with conversation, and whether it pick up sales in you or what. Yeah. Microphone. So cool.
Now Okay.
Got a room. Serenity Hotel.
Hand them out.
Looks like the skies are pretty dark.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Welcome to the July meeting of the Delaware Valley Amateur Astronomers. Thanks, everyone, for coming tonight, and welcome to everyone on YouTube. From time to time, we like to honor people that have done a lot for the club, and tonight we're honoring Mike Tucker. Mike is has been a longtime member. Oh, Jeremy, it's not advancing. Am I not on this right place? Okay, there we go. Brian, could you lower the lights a little bit, please? Thanks. So Mike hasn't been around lately because he's been ill, but he has been an amazing value to the club over many years. He was president twice in 1997 and 1998. He was vice president for 3 years, secretary for 2, treasurer for 2, observing chair for many, and membership chair for many, many. So he has been a real gem in terms of how this club functions. And so we decided to honor him with an Exceptional Service Award. And this was a plaque that was delivered to his house earlier this week to let him know how much we appreciate his service. Here's Mike. He did a lot of outreach. And here's Mike at one of our pandemic outreach events. You can see we're all decked up there with masks. So I asked people what kind of things they thought of when they thought of Mike. What did he do for the club? And the biggest thing I heard was he was a human astronomical encyclopedia. He knew a lot about the sky. And he shared that with a lot of people. He was an instructor at the mainline school night, something that he did for many years. He did indoor and outdoor observing clinics, and he ran several of them. He did elementary school outreach. He was especially good with technology. He was an early adapter of technology that we could use at the club. And so people used him as a troubleshooter to figure it out when things weren't working. And he developed computer support systems for astroimaging and worked with people who were doing remote observing. So that was his troubleshooting ability, which we made a lot of use of. He introduced live internet presentations at club meetings. What would we do without that? An electronic card catalog of DVAA holdings, and he was a host of the Messier meetings. So I think we honor Mike tonight as someone who's contributed mightily to the club, and let's give him a show of our. Okay, thanks, Mike. Now some bit about what we're doing, what activities are coming up. We have our next public star party at Valley Forge is Saturday, August 10th at 8 p.m. with a backup date of the 11th. And we've had really good luck this year. We've gotten good weather on most of our nights. So hopefully our luck will continue, and hope to see lots of you out there. A reminder about the regional overnight star parties. Some people will be going to Stellafane in Vermont. That's a little far to consider regional, but it's very special. So that's why we list it. There's an LVAS meeting called Megameet, and that's pretty close. That's up near Allentown, I believe.
Hamburg.
Where?
Hamburg.
Hamburg. Oh, okay. Black Forest Star Party is not yet registered. Last month we talked about it. We thought it was sold out, but actually they have not opened registration yet. I saw an update on their website today that they are going to announce the date soon.
I have about 20 minutes to get in.
Yeah. When they do, you'll have moments only. So anyway, but it's still right now on the list. Then there's the South Jersey Star Party and the York County Star Party with dates which are probably going to be October 3rd through the 6th. So please put these on your calendar. They're lots of fun. There's a great opportunity to meet other people in the region that do astronomy, not just the people in our club that we see all the time. So I hope to see you out at some of those events. Then we have the main sequence star party at the Big Dipper Lodge. And actually, Bill is here. Bill, do you want to say anything about this?
Sure.
Sure? Okay.
Why not?
Somebody had asked me last time I talked about this, about the field. So here I have Bill's photo of the field. You can see, here's where the sleeping quarters are. Here's a pavilion where there's electricity and the field is huge. So we've got plenty of room for camping and plenty of room for setting up. Here you go.
Yeah, so just to talk a little more about the field. This area in here is behind this fence is wide open. And then when we get over to that pavilion over there on the left side, the electric is not plentiful. So you only have maybe 2 outlets over there. Definitely recommend bringing battery if you have it. But otherwise, it's a big field, and it's a half mile down from Cherry Springs. And we're gonna actually be running this the same time Black Forest is running. So if you decide not to go to Black Forest, you can join us over here, and hopefully we have the same clear skies they do. But yeah, so we have a pricing structure. The club has been subsidizing heavily at times some of these trips, and we're trying to kind of bring it back up so the club can get a little more in the black on these. So we have this pricing structure up here for people who want to be in a cabin. As I mentioned before, there's 2 rooms in the cabin that have queen size beds, and then there's 1 queen size bed upstairs that shares a room with a small twin, and there's a bathroom upstairs and shower upstairs, and the bathroom and shower downstairs. Otherwise, and you probably could sleep on the couch, which I think folds out. Otherwise, the field itself is nice and big. So we're hoping that some people, if we decide to all go up and do this one, that we have people who take the cabin, and if we have overflow, we'll start doing yard, because it really is a great setup, and really would love to see more of the club members up there. So yeah, back to you, Jim.
Okay, one of our favorite events of the year is an outdoor picnic, which we have in Fort Washington State Park, September 13th. And what we'll be doing this year is astronomy themed workshops. So you'll when you get there, you'll sign up for a couple of topics, 2 topics max that you'd like. And this is optional. You don't have to go to a workshop, but you're welcome to do that. And we'll have food, free food, door prizes, lots of door prizes this year. Help with your telescope if you'd like. Bring a telescope and you can set it up and get help with it. And weather permitting, we'll be observing. So the whole event happens rain or shine because we have a pavilion. The observing part that happens after it gets dark will happen weather dependent. And next week we have a dark sky clinic. We hopefully will have a dark sky clinic for beginning and intermediate observers. And this is a really good opportunity if you would like some one-on-one help with your telescope. We have lots of instructors lined up. And so it'll be basically either 1 or 2 people to an instructor with your telescope. The only iffy part is weather. So we have July 26th, that's Friday, as the first date. And then we have 2 backup dates, the 27th and the 28th. So hopefully one of those nights will be nice enough for us to get out there under the stars. We will be doing not just telescope help. How does your telescope work? We'll also be pointing out things you can see in the sky. That's the reason we want to go to Green Lane Park, where it's dark, reasonably dark. And then we'll also be helping anyone who needs help with astrophotography questions. You have to register though. Don't show up if you haven't registered, because we need to know you're coming and we need to know what kind of scope you have so we can make sure that we have help that will answer your questions. So tomorrow's the last day to sign up, everybody. Okay. All right. Now we have a report from Brian, our welcoming committee chair. Oh, we should turn the lights on so we could see the new members. Thank you. Did I turn it off?
Thanks, Mitch. I'm Brian Lee, welcoming chair. As of this month, July 2024, we have 5 new members. Catherine and John Holtz. I know John's here tonight. Anna Gatsiris, Todd Selkovich, and Karen Zane, and I know Karen's here as well tonight. So make her feel welcome.
Anybody here for the first time tonight? Oh, wow. That's awesome. Welcome. Okay, do you want to hand out the?
Oh,
Start
doing that now?
I guess, well, we're.
Yeah, so our speaker gave us some nice stickers from the Webb telescope. He'll pass it around. You can take one and pass the rest around.
Okay, let's see, we have, as you notice, we have a telescope over there. And this was a donation, which we are making available to the membership. And it's going to be introduced to us by Al.
Well, this scope was donated about 3 weeks ago to the DVAA. It's a Meade ETX 70, 70mm diameter. It comes with 3 eyepieces, a 40mm, 20mm, and 9mm. Has 2 diagonals, a red dot finder, 2 auto stars. It works with 8 AAA batteries. If you have an external battery, you need to find a cable that will fit the power, you get a power cord. Otherwise, it works with the batteries. It comes with 2 nice padded cases. It has written back 5-star Atlas and in my book, all for $100. Not a bad deal. So it's also on our media website on the classifieds. So if somebody wants it, they take it today, so we don't have to take it out the storage or wherever how. So that would save us a lot of trouble.
With anyone else with announcements tonight? Okay, then I would like to introduce long-term members, Lynn and John Badelschmidt. They're going to share with us their trip to Indiana for the eclipse. So down, so he's standing. We have to stand there. Yeah, see it. You'll. Here's where the camera is. Okay. All right. Well, there you go.
Thanks, Jan.
Mike. Oh.
No, this is fine.
It's turned on.
To turn it on too.
Ask us which one.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jan, for the introduction.
We just wanted to say that we thoroughly enjoyed the previous meeting a couple months ago, where people explained how their eclipse trips went. And we unfortunately weren't able to attend that meeting, but we enjoyed it on YouTube, which is a great addition to the club's capabilities. So for Lynn and I, this experience was a special one because it was our first eclipse. And our daughter and family were able to join us from Colorado. And it turned out to be a perfect experience. Everything went great, which, you know, things in astronomy don't often happen that way. So we were very appreciative of that. The title slide here shows my daughter and myself. My daughter's was a member of the club since 1992, I believe it was, and helped me build an 18-inch Dobsonian telescope, and is still involved in astronomy out in Colorado with her son and husband. And here we are celebrating the imminent occurrence.
Too well in the back, so let's put this.
Just about to hand it over to my wife.
Oh. I can use this stuff. Yeah. You put this in your pocket or just. Okay.
Looks like you're jumping for joy there.
We didn't expect it to be so perfect. Everything went great and she had a great time, and it was quite an experience for everyone who attended there. When Lynn and I were planning the eclipse trip, we wanted to make a road trip out of it because we know it's always helpful to have a plan B for astronomical events. And so the road trip was Lynn's responsibility while I tried to figure out what equipment we should take along for the astronomical part of things.
Okay, so we decided to plan our road trip around a couple of our interests. Architecture and nature. And so we discovered that there was this place called Polymath Park out in western Pennsylvania, just north of Falling Water. And many of you may have visited Frank Lloyd Wright's famous Falling Water. But this was an interesting park that we had never been to. And it's actually a museum of houses built either by Frank Lloyd Wright, designed by him, or by an early student of his. And it's a fascinating place to visit because you can take a tour and see these homes. Two of the homes were built by his student for some wealthy families in Pittsburgh to act as summer retreats for them up in the woods. But two of the homes were designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. This home was built in Michigan, and this other home was built in Illinois. And the interesting and fascinating thing about it was that a crew of carpenters and builders were sent out to these homes, and they deconstructed the houses, labeled everything, boxed it all up, transported over to Polymath Park, and then painstakingly recreated it in its entirety. And in fact, a couple of the homes came with some additional interior pieces, furniture and furnishings. And so the tours were just incredibly informative and interesting and different. And so this was really a very worthwhile place to stop out in western Pennsylvania, about 4 hours from here. Yes?
How far apart were the houses?
We took a little shuttle ride around. The tour puts you on a little shuttle bus and takes you around. And I mean, they
About
were
a quarter mile.
Yeah, not far at all. And a couple of the houses actually offer accommodations. You can stay there. So that was interesting. The next day, we took a 3-hour drive over to Columbus, Ohio, and we went to the Franklin Conservatory and Botanical Gardens. We were there waiting for our family from Colorado to arrive at the airport. And we spent a couple of hours here, got to see the beautiful tulips in bloom in early April. And they also have a wonderful collection of Dale Chihuly's glass sculptures there. And they integrate them with the nature and the exhibits to great effect. I mean, this to me was fabulous, seeing this sculpture with the trees. They actually have a hot house there where they do glass blowing exhibits and lessons. They had a fabulous butterfly room there that was really aflutter with lots of activity. And they just advise you not to take any hitchhikers as you leave. And then we picked up our daughter, son-in-law, and our grandson, and we traveled over to Springfield, Ohio, about an hour away, which was our base for 2 nights before the eclipse. And it seemed like a good location for a jumping off point. But the day before the eclipse, we went to a fabulous museum you may have been to, the National Museum of the Air Force in Dayton, Ohio, which is just mammoth. It has an incredible history of aviation, incredible displays that are so well done. It would probably take a couple of days to really take this whole museum in, but it was just perfect for, an afternoon there to kind of get us in the mood for all things space related. They had a Air Force One. This was from Kennedy's era, and you get to go through the interior of it and see what it looks like. And then this crew was brave enough to go on the simulator behind them for an out of this world experience and live to tell about it. And then this is where we were headed. You want to take over there?
Sure. So from Ohio, we looked at the weather and saw some openings in the clouds that we were following. And it looked like Indiana was going to be a pretty promising place to observe the eclipse from. So we found a park that was very close to the center line of the eclipse. Oddly enough, it was named Sunset Park. And there were very few crowds there. And it was just a fabulous place to observe from. So this is our setup, as you can see.
It's in the little town of Shelbyville, Indiana, if any of you know where that is. We never heard of it, but we just discovered it.
So this is my grandson looking through the PST telescope, the solar telescope that focuses on hydrogen alpha light. And we did the colander experiment, of course, with showing a whole series of Pac-Man images that were actually the beginning of the eclipse. And the classic shot of the family with their eclipse glasses on. And I would point out to you that the sky behind us was pure blue, not a cloud in that part of the sky. And it was that way for the entire eclipse around the sun. So this is our setup with the Sea Star. We weren't familiar with the Sea Star a few weeks before this until we went to the Valley Forge Star Party the previous month and saw Bill McGeeney, our former president, at a setup, and the images he was showing were just incredible. And
Not only that, but his enthusiasm for it was a real selling point. I said he should be a salesman for it because it was just mind blowing. And I told John we had to have one of these little telebabies.
it's not often she says that about us.
Did you have to sell one of your old stoves?
No, I don't require that.
So this is what people saw who were wandering around during the eclipse, and everybody seemed to think it was pretty odd, and were
And awesome, really. We had
Yeah,
a crowd.
people asked if they could stay and watch for a while because you could actually see a little bit of movement. And of course, my daughter was very interested in this new device as well. And this is an image from the iPhone at total solar eclipse time. And it's a little brighter than, it's a little overexposed because the actual perception of this image would be like this, where you could actually see Venus to the lower right.
Barely, but it's there.
And that's a contrail there on the left, and some clouds at the horizon. This was this 360-degree sunset view that you see during the total eclipse. Everywhere you look around you, it looks like the sun has just set. But of course, the sun is above your head. This was during the totality. You can see the corona quite clearly. It was very spectacular when that emerged. And so I just wanted to say that we weren't familiar with this technology. We had spent about 20 minutes with the Sea Star before going on the trip. So we hadn't taken any pictures, and we were cautioned not to get too locked into technology and just enjoy the moment, be in the moment for your first eclipse. So we set it up so that it would take time-lapse photos every 30 seconds during the eclipse, and hoping that would be put into a movie. But we were afraid to check it out until we got home for fear of erasing it or something. So I'll show you how that turned out in a bit. This is a shot my grandson took with an iPhone through the eyepiece of PST in hydrogen alpha light right after the eclipse totality. You can still see a little prominence in the upper right, 1 o'clock position, I guess.
Well, after that exciting day, we were on a high for the next, certainly the next day. And we gravitated into Indianapolis and stopped at the Sun and Moon Cafe for lunch and tried to decide what to do with our family before they had to head home to work and school. So we decided what would be fun would be to spend an hour locked in a room, using puzzles and clues to try to escape. And if you haven't done an escape room ever, it's really great fun. We've done them a few times with our family. But after we saw them off, we went to a location that we've been wanting to go to for years, and that is Columbus, Indiana. And we learned about this town, this exceptional little small town, Midwestern town, that is known for its art and architecture and historic buildings. We learned about it in 2017 from a film called Columbus, and it was just a sweet little coming of age film, but it was set in this town, and it just won our hearts, and we just wanted to go there and see these places in real life. And the way this little town came about was that it had one industry, and I'll talk about this map in just a minute, but this industry that took place in this small town was taking off, and the founder of the industry told the local banker, you know, we need to build this town up because I need workers. And so the financier of the business said to the local town commission, well, if you need to build a school or a firehouse or a bank or any bridge or anything, if you will hire an architect off the list, my list of favorite architects, then I will pay their fee. And so the town took him up on that. And as a result, there are 97 locations, sites, buildings, bridges, sculptures, scattered around this small little Midwestern town, so much so that it's become a mecca of architecture in the United States and around the world, actually. And it's amazing. You come into town on this small little iconic bridge, and you enter this like magical place that has an incredible diversity of important buildings. this is the place where we stayed. This is called the Inn at Irwin Gardens. And built by a local architect, but in the foreground there is a Henry Moore sculpture called the Arch. To the left of that is the edge of a brick building, which is a library designed by I.M. Pei. Behind us is a bank designed by Alia Saarinen, whose son Eero Saarinen built a few other important places in town. And it's just really a fascinating place to visit. And I'd say it's about 9 hours drive from here right to Columbus, Indiana.
This is an exploded view of a diesel engine made by the Cummins Company. And this was the engine for the economy of the whole town, actually. These engines were used in trucks, tanks, buses, all sorts of vehicles. And it's an incredibly successful venture for the town. Yeah.
So yes,
Cummings was the main thing that got the town going.
yes. So then we headed home and we were very anxious to see what we got.
So it turns out that taking an image every 30 seconds resulted in a video that lasted less than 10 seconds.
So get ready, don't blink. But we were actually pleased with that. Yeah, there's one more.
So
So let me
it's the
just,
same one.
yeah, I know, I have to get to the next one. Okay, hold on. That last slide. All right. Here we go.
So Lynn took
Okay.
took the
No, I got
images
it.
that were
Oh.
produced by that movie and took it into a Macintosh and processed it with a slow motion capability and turned it into 140 seconds of a movie. So it makes it much more interesting and a little bit more realistic, I guess.
I think when it gets to the approaches totality, it becomes really nice to see a little bit more of it rather than it flashing by.
Is it automatic exposure?
It's automatic exposure except for totality where we had to take the filter off the C-Star. You'll see that coming up in just a few seconds. And then after totality was over, we had to put the filter back in. So when we got home, my son, the artist, asked me if I could explain the celestial mechanics of a solar eclipse in a concise way without my purported over-explaining. And I said, "No, son."
Well done.
That's it.
That's it.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Lynn and John. That was fantastic. Now I think we're ready to introduce our program chair, Jeremy Carlo, who's going to introduce our speaker of the night.
Has anybody seen that guy? No, all right. All right. So there are a couple extra stickers up here. If anyone didn't get them, if the orbit passed you by, you can get them up probably at the end of the meeting. All right, so a little update about upcoming programs. So in August, we're going to have Ed Sion from Villanova University. He's going to be talking about cataclysmic variables and novas, including T Corona Borealis. Last I saw, that hasn't gone off yet. Right? Haven't checked for a couple days. Maybe it'll go off, maybe it won't. So I guess we'll see what happens. September, as Jan said, we'll have the outdoor meeting at Fort Washington. In October, we're gonna have Jamie Rankin from Princeton University, and she's gonna be telling us about the Voyager mission and what they've been up to the last couple of years, plumbing the outer solar system. And hot off the press is in November, we're gonna have Lowell Gustafson and Brian Ampolsk, and they're gonna tell us about Mayan cosmology. So I think they were inspired by last month's talk with sort of the European cosmology, if you will. So we'll learn a little bit about what was happening in the Americas and how they viewed the skies. So tonight, I'm glad to have our speaker for this evening. I've been looking forward to this for a while. We have Isabel Hunt. She is a flight operations engineer at the Space Telescope Science Institute, working on the Webb telescope. She did her bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering over at, down the road at Temple University, and then joined the winning team over in astronomy. Has been working on the Webb ever since. So please join me in welcoming Isabel Hunt. How do we go full screen on this?
Yep, sounds good. Maybe put that in your pocket. And if you stand in front of the camera, they'll be able to see you on YouTube. So it.
Oh, sure. Seen how we do full screen in
Just, you know.
F11. Oh, that was it.
No problem.
Oh, well. It's not letting me do that though. Let's see, let's bring it here.
Are you opening it in?
This is in Adobe.
Hmm.
Does anyone know how to do full screen in Adobe?
Oh.
Control.
You know, I did this the other day.
It's a PDF. I don't know if I can. Yeah, I guess we can export to PowerPoint. Yeah, that's what we're trying. Let's convert it and see what happens.
I think it's still
Saved anything.
Oh, there it is.
Here it is. Okay.
Yeah,
There we
good.
go. All right.
Fabulous.
Davies caught once again.
Great, thanks so much for that introduction. I'm really excited to be talking about web operations. So a little bit about me, even though I already kind of covered it. I actually went to Upper Darby.
Turn your mic on.
Oh, still on. How's that? Okay, great. So I went to Upper Darby High School just down the road, so it's nice to be back in stomping grounds. And then I went to Temple for mechanical engineering. And during that time, I spent the summer at the Green Bank Radio Telescope. First as a camp counselor, and then the next summer I was back as a summer student, and I was helping work on their telescope code. And then the summer after that, I was a Brooke Owens Fellow, which is a fellowship for women in aerospace. And during that time, I went and worked at Maiden Space, which is a really great experience. And then about 6 months after I graduated, I went to STSCI, Space Telescope Science Institute, and that is where we operate Webb. So I'm gonna run this talk very similar to how I trained for the job, which is spend a while learning exactly how web works, and then actually get into operations. And then I'll talk a little bit about the science at the end, but that really is not my wheelhouse. It's mainly just the operations part. So starting with just that design, scientists came up with the idea for the Webb telescope before Hubble had even ever launched. They wanted something way, way bigger, for a couple of reasons. Bigger telescope or a bigger mirror is going to get you much crisper images. It's going to be able to see different objects. And the big engineering challenge, of course, is how do you launch a mirror that big? Hubble, a little bigger than the size of a person, whereas Webb is 6.6 meters all the way across and can see, I believe, 13 billion light years away. So much more power behind Webb. Looking here at the electromagnetic spectrum, that little sliver there of just the visible light is everything that we can see, just like the regular rainbow. You can see Hubble is mainly focusing on that section. Spitzer's focusing on that high infrared stuff there. And then Webb is kind of filling in the gap in between for that low and mid infrared wavelength. And there's a couple of reasons that astronomers are so interested in low and mid infrared wavelengths. The first is that young planets aren't emitting a ton of visible light. They're much easier to see in the infrared, so we can observe young planets. Another big reason that we want to look at low and mid infrared is, and this is kind of the part when people talk about Webb being a time machine, things that were formed years and years ago, they emit UV and visible light, and then they go through cosmological redshifting to their waves will stretch out to be low infrared. So I try and describe this as if space-time is like a deflated balloon, and if you draw a little wave on it and then blow up the balloon, the wave's going to get longer. So that's what all of the waves of these first things in the universe that were being formed are doing. And so by the time those wavelengths reach Webb, they've stretched out into this low and mid infrared light, and that's exactly what we're looking at. So we're looking at something that started a really long time ago, and now that it's reached, it's stretched out and we can observe it. And another great reason for having Webb and looking at low and mid infrared is that it can really cut through dust in space. So dust is a big problem for astronomers, gets in the way of very far away things, very dim things, and Webb is really good at being able to see through them because infrared waves are bigger and they can cut through that dust and we can see the universe in a lot more detail. So one of our favorite images, Colors of Creation. The image on the left is a Hubble image on the right is Webb. So you can see right away how many more stars and galaxies you can see in the Webb image, just because we're cutting through all of that dust. Another interesting part of this image is the lens flare. So on Hubble you have 4 because it's a circular lens, and on Webb you have 6 for the hexagonal mirror. And then we can talk about some spectra. So this is where all of the scientists are getting all of their favorite data. So a spectroscopy graph is really measuring the density of wavelengths of a certain wavelength. So if we're just looking at this little red galaxy, 13.1 billion years old, you can see that it's made up of a lot of oxygen and hydrogen and some neon. And this is what scientists are most interested in. They want to know like what the universe is actually made of, what's out there that's really far away. And, you know, they can figure out kind of what's out there. So onto the engineering. The bottom half of Webb, this hot side on the right, really acts like a satellite, any low Earth orbit satellite. It's got a solar array, it's got the high gain antenna, which is what we use to connect with the telescope. It's got the propulsion system, it's got the star tracker. And then on the top half really acts like an observatory. And then that line of demarcation in between would be the sun shield, those 5 silver layers in the middle. So the observatory half, of course, is made up of all of our science instruments and our primary mirror. That's the cold side. Very important that all of the instruments stay very, very cold. So it really is just putting like a whole observatory on the back side of the satellite. And the reason that this works so well is because of the orbit of Webb. So Webb is circling the L2 point in space, or the L2 Lagrange point. And this is a gravitationally significant spot in space where L2 circles the sun in the exact same way that Earth orbits the sun. And then Webb orbits around the L2 point in the same way the moon orbits around Earth. And in this image, Webb is going in and out of the screen. And it's a little hard because Webb's tiny, but the hot side in this case will always be facing the sun. And that's the only reason that this works. The observation half is always facing out. So yeah. Next, we have the ISIM module, or the Integrated Science Instrument module. So that's it before it was actually placed on Webb. And then you have all of the instruments. So MIRI, which is the mid-infrared instrument, NIRCam, the near-infrared camera, NIRIS, near-infrared imager and slitless spectrograph, and NIRSPEC, which is the near-infrared spectrograph. And just a little table of what each of those instruments are capable of, and then also their field of view. So that's what each instrument is looking at, and then all together is the Webb field of view. And you can see that on the next slide. But as you can see, we've got a whole lot of observing modes that are used for different things, and scientists will pick exactly what they want, and the choosing committee helps them with exactly what they need based on filters and so on. So this is the OVT, which is the Observatory Visualization Tool. And this is kind of what we put up when tours come through mission control. So give you a little taste of that as if you're really in the room. On the left, like I said, that's the field of view. That's what Webb's eyes are looking like. And then just a little diagram of Webb on the right with some accurate stars in the background. This is always just a fun tool to bring up to see what everything's looking like at a certain time. So now we're going to hop into some operations. Starting super exciting with the org chart. This is the flight operations team. So all the way on the left, that flight control team is what I do. There's 12 of us. We operate Webb 24/7. So I kind of have a nurse's schedule in that I work for 4 days and then I have off for 4 days. And we alternate whether we're on day shift or night shift. And then we have the flight systems engineering branch, which every instrument and every spacecraft subsystem has their own engineering lead. And then the ground systems engineer team. I just want to point out the STEM engineer. Everything that we send up to Webb, anything we load onto the spacecraft, any code that gets sent up there goes through in like ground test simulator by the SIM engineers. And so people always ask me like, oh my God, are you so afraid you're going to crash it? No, it goes through like 12 people before it ever gets to me. So specifically the SIM engineer is kind of that first line of defense to making sure everything works. So this is what the mock looks like. This is kind of the second, and the first row is a little blocked, but this is the room. It's a really great room. This is normally a thing mission control is super dark and scary. We have like a whole wall of windows looking out onto Johns Hopkins campus. So then I'm going to go right to left. So on the far right, we've got the command controller, the CC, and that is the person in charge of kind of monitoring telemetry, making sure everything's okay, but then also sending up all of those commands. So we got pre-written scripts. We send those up to the telescope. The operations controller, or the OC, is in charge of communicating with all of those subsystems engineers I mentioned before. So if we're doing like a special activity or something has gone wrong and we're recovering it, the OC is just making sure that everyone's on the same page and checking that commands are like ready to be sent and making sure that everything's in the proper state. And the ground systems engineer, or the GSE, is in charge of maintaining command and telemetry between mission control, or the mock, and the spacecraft. So I used to CC, and I actually just started being a GSC. And to talk a little bit more about how we actually are able to connect to web, we have a middleman called DSN, or the Deep Space Network. So down here on the right, that's us in Baltimore at the Space Telescope Science Institute, like I said, on Johns Hopkins campus. And then all the way on the left, you see the DSN, or the Deep Space Network, and they've got dishes in Goldstone, Madrid, and Canberra, which is important because of our orbit and Webb's orbit. Sometimes Goldstone won't be able to see Webb, and that's why they have dishes all over the world. So Webb's almost always in view. Sometimes there are blackout periods, but they're usually very short. So in a 24-hour time period, we usually have about 10 to 12 hours of contact with Webb, interspersed throughout those 24 hours. And yeah, DSN's our middleman, so we'll send commands from STSCI over to DSN. DSN sends that up to Webb. Webb, when we downlink the data, we'll send it to DSN and then back over to us. So that's how we're in contact with them.
How long does it take for that complete cycle to?
I think it's like 7 seconds.
7
6 seconds. It's not a big delay. So this contact schedule, all of these contacts get set up far in advance, probably like 6 weeks. And this is our contact schedule website that tells us when our contacts are occurring. So that visibility I talked about, where one station can see, but the other one can't. That's on the bottom there. So the middle row is Canberra. You can see it's going up to like hour 20, and then Madrid will pick it up. So that's the visibility. That's not necessarily when we're in contact. That's just who can see Webb. So we kind of know if we need to like pick up more time, who we can actually call. And then as for the actual contacts, LOS is loss of signal, AOS is acquisition of signal. And then DSS 3.6 and DSS 5.4, those are the specific dishes that we're using, or stations.
Question.
Yeah.
Yeah. How far is the Webb telescope from the L2 point? The L2 point is like 6 million miles.
Yeah, I actually have no idea. I only knew the million number. I don't know how far it is from the point that it orbits around.
Follow-up question.
Mhm.
What's the orbital period around L2?
Don't know.
Okay.
I wasn't there for commissioning. I didn't have to do that math.
You won't know the other.
Yeah, it's true. I would know the other.
Just like to request, we could save the questions for the end, because people won't hear you on YouTube with what you're saying unless I bring the mic around to you. So we'll go to questions at the end of you.
Okay, well, it's good they missed those because I know the answer.
They heard the answer.
So yeah, we'll look at that to know when the next contact is. So getting into like what a contact will look like. We start with pre-track. So this is where the GSC will call up the station and we do a little back and forth. It's very military. You say, how do you read me? Oh, I can read you 5-5. How me? I read you the same. Then I ask the station if they're ready for the pre-track, and they say yes or no. And if it's yes, then I go into the beginning of track at 2210 Zulu and end of track at 0100 Zulu, and we'll be using SOE Bravo, which is just like their specific paper for the settings that they use for the specific pass. And this is the phone that I use to call them, special like just DSN phone. So that happens an hour before we actually get into contact, every single contact. And then we have our nominal activity. So this is what my computer screen looks like when I'm CCing. It's across 4 monitors. And there's a lot going on. I wish we could see it a little better, but yeah, the details are not important anyway. The bottom right is the ops main page. So this is just a big overview of everything that's happening on the spacecraft. Same thing with the all the thing in like the middle top with all the hexagons. That's giving you similar data. The blue thing is the temperature of all of the mirrors individually. And then one of my favorite things to point out is the little web diagram there in green. When it's green like that, that means that the spacecraft is slewing, so it's turning its roll picture, yeah. And then when it stops being green, it goes back to gray. It'll start tracking a star, which is the guiding quick look thing below it. So it'll start zeroing in on its guide star, and then it'll go into fine guide mode, which is when it's actually making an observation. We've got some things to tell me how much data we're downlinking and at what rate. We've got our alarm panels on the left. If something goes wrong, there's a lot of erroneous alarms or alarms that like we can deal with ourselves. And then there's bad alarms that like we have to call specific engineers to deal with. And then these three middle panels at the bottom, those are all of our commanding windows. So they're each used for different things, but that's actually where we're sending the commands from. And we have some buttons for like quick things that we have to do every single contact. And then anything more specific, we load up the file. So that's what I have blacked out there. And then to go through our nominal activities, every single contact, we do states of health. We dump a bunch of tables or downlink a bunch of tables for information that different engineers want. And then we start playback, which is our word for playbacking all of the data that Webb has been collecting since the last time we were in contact with it. So Webb collects data on its solid state recorder, made up of 3 different sections: critical data, engineering data, and science data. And you can see this percentage full circled in red. In this case, the science data was about 28% full partition. When it reaches like 80%, it'll stop doing parallel observations, which is when it's using 2 instruments. And when it reaches 98% full, they'll stop observing completely. It like never gets 98% full. I'd say whenever I come in contact, it's like 40%. We dump all the data, get it down to 0. It keeps observing. And then the engineering data is all for the engineers, obviously. A lot of it's like duplicates of data. We'll get the same data in the tables and the engineering files, and we never lose anything because it's all repeated all the time. Can I go back? Okay. So this is the observation plan. You guys can go online and Google like Webb observation plan, and then skip the part that's AI and then go down to STSCI, and they'll have a website where you can see the observation plan for Webb. It's posted every week, I believe. And you can see this day. They're observing brown dwarf stars using a variety of instruments and modes. And this visit ID was number 3375. So keep that in mind. Another thing you could Google and find is what is Webb observing? And the first website that comes up is going to be this one. And it'll give you a diagram of exactly what Webb's observing right now based on that observation plan that we were just looking at. That's kind of fun to just like quick see what's going on. You can open up the more details and you can see the same things that I just said. It's using your spec, it's using Mary, it's observing brown dwarf stars, and it's that proposal 3375 at the bottom there. And you can click on the proposal and see actually what they want to do with it, which is really cool. And then back to my ops main page. So this is when I came in contact this day. And down here, also circled in red, is the observation plan executor. And you can see there V03375. So I know that Webb is actually observing that, and it's on track, it's on plan, it hasn't skipped any visits, and it's actually observing what was on the plan. Webb's really smart in that if it can't lock onto its guide star or something happens, it'll skip that visit and move on to the next one, so it's not wasting any time that it could be observing. And then they reschedule in whatever got skipped to run again. So that's how I know that it's on track. And then these are non-nominal things that we don't do. Well, they're normal, but we don't do them every single day. So this is specifically station keeping. Webb has about 30 years of fuel on board at this point still. And every 6 weeks we do a little station keeping, and they burn just like a little itty bit of fuel to make sure it stays in orbit. So that's when the propulsion team will be in the room, and we're all on our headsets, and that's when the OC is talking to the propulsion team. And we send off all of these commands to do these station keeping burns. And then when it's actually doing the burn, the little like engines at the bottom will actually have little fire coming out of it. Like, fun and silly that they would add that in there. But yeah, this is something we just do every 6 weeks. There's other like non-nominal things they do, like a Mary grading wheel test where they spin the Mary like filter wheel like one time, just to go through the whole thing to make sure it works and go backwards and do the whole thing. So they do that every now and then. But yeah, those are happening during like 9 to 5 when all the engineers are in. And then anomalies. So like I mentioned before, some like normal things can go wrong. Simple faults, flip bits, things that we can deal with. Sometimes like actual things go wrong. And like instruments will shut off to make sure that it's safe, or the whole telescope will go into safe mode to make sure that it's safe. Web has a real like strong urge to just turn off if something might be going wrong, it just turns off entirely to protect itself. So when that happens, we have an alarm system basically. So text gets sent out to everyone, the OC is calling the mom or the missions operations manager, we're calling engineers. If it's something that we've seen before, we're following a standard operating procedure. And then an AMB meeting is starting, which is just like an anomaly meeting board. And it all happens very quickly. So they get into that first meeting with the relevant people who are on call. And then by like the next morning, they kind of know what's wrong with it. And they're getting all of their scripts together to recover like that afternoon. So it usually takes like a day. And then depending on how bad the anomaly is, depends how long it takes to recover something. So if it's like a full safing, it takes like 8 hours, like 6 to 8 hours of commanding. And if it's just like an instrument or something not so dramatic, like an hour or 2, it's not so bad. So yeah, we'll go on a little bit to the science. This is a mast. This is where all of the web data goes. So scientists who got their proposals accepted for web, we're in year 3 of science right now. We just started year 3. They get their data exclusively for like 6 months to a year, I believe. And then it goes on to mass. So it's a thing that I love about web is that it's open source. Anyone can go on and take this data and they can like edit the photos themselves in Photoshop. So like when we release all the images, they go through a bunch of like Photoshop and color grading to make them most visually and like scientifically appealing. And like you can go and do that yourself. Like all of the programs are available to you and all the data is available. And then everyone who didn't get their proposals picked can also use the data. And then of course the science releases, which you may or may not know, they released them all in like fun little articles so you can read a little bit about them. I'm sure you guys know so much more about some of the things that they talk about in these articles, because sometimes I read them, I'm like, that didn't tell me anything. And these are some recent ones you may or may not have seen. This is Serpent's Nebula. I just thought this one was really pretty. This one is the penguin and the egg. So these are just 2 galaxies combining. It looks like the egg is much smaller, but they're actually the same mass. So they're just a couple of new releases. And then in the same way that they came up with Webb right before like Hubble had even launched, they already have the next big telescope that they want to launch. So this is the Nancy Grace Roman telescope set to launch in 2027, I believe. So you can see the images that Webb is creating and the images that Hubble is creating, the kind of size, and you can see how massive Roman's field of view is. So their whole goal here is to just have the biggest field of view. They want to work on like concentration of galaxies. So whenever they come up with a new telescope, they're really focusing on one specific thing that they really want to look at. They really want to know in the scientific community. So you can see, even though Roman has such a small wavelength that it's looking at, it's seeing such a vast like swath of sky. So yeah, everyone watch out for when that launches. Should be 2027. We'll see. And that's everything. And we already passed out the stickers, so we can just go on to questions.
Yeah, I got it.
Thank you.
What type of file system, on that website do they have? Is it TIFF or?
Yeah, it's TIFF files. Yeah.
The Roman telescope has a smaller mirror, but a wider.
Yeah.
field.
Yeah, I believe it just has to do with the focal point or the focal length of the mirror. So it like won't capture in as much detail because it's not bigger, but it can see.
Broader.
Yeah.
Also, did you say that every 6 weeks they tweak it with the positioning and?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't really know the math behind it. But it'll start like falling a little bit out of orbit. Nothing like it's not like careening off course, but it'll do a little burn to make sure it's exactly on course. And you know, it also uses the fuel to tilt for different observations.
That's not done constantly, it's every 6 weeks they do?
Yeah, well, it started every 4 weeks, and then it was doing so well in orbit that they decided to drop it down to every 6 weeks.
Thanks.
What's the biggest emergency that you dealt with?
We had like right when I started, they had a whole spacecraft safing. I can't even remember the reason because I don't think I knew what was happening when I started. But yeah, it was a full, so the observatory has certain modes. It'll be like observing mode and then inertial pointing, which is when it just puts itself back into like its correct orientation, like its perfect orientation. And then below that is like a safing, and there's like an actual like real emergency one. So we went to the safing one, which just means that all the instruments shuts off and like the spacecraft kind of shuts off instead of just like an individual instrument. So that was probably the worst one. But still not bad, just turn it back on.
How often do they, or can they, or do they calibrate those mirrors, since they're all separate mirrors? I would imagine that there's some calibration that takes place.
That'd be the wavefront sensing subsystem. I mean, I know during commissioning, which I was not there for, that was when they did all of the like setting up of those mirrors. They had they like used the mirrors to take like a test image, and it was like all super blurry and funky, and then you know they do their adjustments and got it right. I don't think they've adjusted them since. Yeah.
What is Webb used for attitude control? Does it use the gas engine?
Yeah, there's like 8 small thrusters and like 4 bigger ones. I don't remember exactly which.
Well, the little probably for attitude, the big ones are probably for.
Yeah.
That's the.
Yeah. I'm not sure exactly.
So what are you using for gas, for fuel?
Whatever's up there. I don't know. I don't know about the fuel, honestly.
It's fuel, right, and hydrogen.
I'm told ones, but.
Oh, that's.
Yeah, that N2H2, hydrazine.
Hydrogen?
Yeah.
We want to get. Hydrogen is on. Well, it's a monochrome. Right? So, it looks like it's a monochrome. Hydrogen.
Whatever it is, it's working.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Closing system isn't really my specialty.
I'm just looking at the picture.
Do anomalies happen quite often?
Not super often. There was one like 2 or 3 week period where NEAREST kept safing like constantly, because they kept putting like the same observation to be like they kept putting the same observation on the observation plan at every time. It kept like confusing nearest and it kept shutting off until they finally got it right. So that was like a stressful couple of weeks just because it kept happening in succession. But I've been operating for 3 years. I think there have been like 8 savings. But again, it's out for like a day. It's nothing like so insane. And a lot of those were during like the start when everything was really getting its footing. There hasn't been one for months now.
So when you have one of those episodes where you lose 8 hours, what happens to those people that were gonna do their project in those 8 hours? Do they have to go back in the queue?
No, so they have the observation plan and the people that set up the plan. There's some time sensitive like observations. And they really like care about those and make sure that they get done on time if we're reaching kind of like the end of the time they could actually be seen. But they plan them so that if they miss it, it can come back up again. So it'll get pushed and they'll adjust for it.
As far as the scheduling, is that automated? Is it done by a computer or is it people who decide we're gonna do this and then we're gonna do that and we're gonna do the other thing?
I'm sure it's a little bit of both. I know the people are picking which projects they want. And then they're helping all of the scientists, the people proposing. Like with what instruments they want to use and filters and guide stars that they want and like backup guide stars in case one fails. And so they have like a lot of say in that. And if that's gonna work really well. And I think when something goes wrong, like 8 hours of downtime, then they'll like have their say in like how everything's getting pushed. But I think for the most part, it's automatically kind of generated.
What's the projected lifespan of the Webb telescope?
It's like 30 years.
30.
It had to do with how much fuel that they used during commissioning, and they used very, very little. So it's still got a good 30 years on it.
What's the situation with micrometeorite impacts? I know it's already been hit.
Yeah, it gets hit like twice a month. But it was built to take some hits. So that's kind of why you have like the 5 layers of sun shield. That's why the mirrors are all cast in beryllium. Like it's all meant to be super strong and like take those hits.
Yes, we have a question from Jeff down in Florida, kind of relevant given what's been going on today. Do you encounter any cyber attacks or threats?
No. No. It's very secure and you know, computers deep. And I mean, like, I couldn't get any of these pictures like at home. I had to be at work taking like any of these screenshots, and I have to go through like 2 computers to get them onto my laptop. Like it's really, no one's getting in there.
Developed your software.
Raytheon. Yeah.
And what's the process of that development in terms of maybe getting your input to how to lay things out so they're sensible, things like that?
Yeah, so I think that there was, I mean, I'm sure they've been developing this for years. So let's look at like this one again. All of these windows, like the Cecil windows, anything that's like a white background, they come up with. Everything that's black, we can customize. So like I can make this ops main page. I've edited it before to put like what you actually want on the page. The propulsion one, like my coworker, Hanson made entirely him. I had to go into his own folder to find it. And my other coworker just took the fine guiding like mimic, that's what we call them, like when it's more of a graphic than a table. He turned that into a whole like airplane looking mimic, so it's like much more like fleshed out and it looks like a like airplane cockpit. So it's super customizable. There are like some funny quirks with that because like they're not building these pages, we are. So like these tables here, everything that all of the telemetry has like an assigned number and then like an actual title and descriptor. And I'm not remembering things based off of these titles or their number by any means. But when you put them in a table, they only put the number up and you can't like edit your key. So a lot of the times if I pull up a new graph, I like can't figure out what each line means because I can't edit the key. So that's like a weird bug in like the whole system, just because Raytheon's developing it and we're the ones actually using it.
Question about, well, the fact that this scope has to operate within the shadow of its shield. What kind of constraints does that put on the observational view of the telescope? If there's parts of the sky that the telescope can't point to because it would be exposed to thermal stresses?
I don't think so. It would just be limited to times of year, right? Because it's orbiting around the sun that whole time. So it would eventually get there. But there are limits to like how much it can tilt and everything before the mirror will get like too hot. So that was one of the savings, like right at the start of commissioning. Something had happened with the sun sensor and it like kept tilting and it just like went back to its like default positioning because it got too hot and it didn't mean to. So yeah, there are like time limitations, but I don't think there's anywhere like it really can't see. You can't look at the sun, that's for sure.
Is it about a third of the sky that it can see at any one time?
Not sure.
I had a question, Hubble, one of the sources that of the emissions, one of the big issues was the gyroscopes. Is the web use gyroscopes? I mean, there's no ability to repair it.
Yeah, it uses gyroscopes.
And they last 30 years.
Yeah. I mean, everything has like double like backups. And I'm sure they learned a lot from the Hubble missions and that servicing. But yeah, web is completely unserviceable. So whatever's on there's got to last a while. But I don't know how many gyroscopes are on board, but I know it's definitely more than one. So I think it's kind of set up so if one fails, they use what they have left for as long as they can.
When the 30-year period is over and it's not serviceable, it's not going to come back to Earth. What are you going to do with it? Sell it on eBay? You have to pick it up.
Blast it off, like just kick it out of orbit. I don't know. I mean, of course they use it for as long as they can, but I'm not sure what their end goal will ever be. So of course, Hubble's still going, so they really use them until they can't anymore.
Thanks so much.
Hey, well, thank you so much. You can tell by this crowd that your presentation topic and hit the sweet spot of what we love to hear about. So thank you very much
Thanks
for putting this together, especially hearing what you went through to put it together.
Yeah, make you really go through like a couple computers to get an image off.
That's amazing. Okay. I just wanted to mention one thing, the Sea Star that Lynn and John mentioned, we've now added that to our rental pool. And there's a waiting list, right, Joe? Yeah, it's very popular, but if you'd like to take it out and take it for a drive, talk to Joe and he'll get you on number 56 or 7 on the waiting list. Just one more thing before we go. Don't forget about the little telescope over here for $100. And if you don't have money with you, we can figure out how to invoice you through the website. And out on the table about the entrance, there are some free copies of Sky and Telescope magazine and astronomy, and you're welcome to take one with you. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate your input. Thanks for the great questions.
Seven to 4, 6 to